A blonde baby in a frilly dress sits on a grand red chair, looking thoroughly unimpressed as someone compliments her outfit. A chaotic dream flashes through a young blonde girl's mind. A woman named Tessa expresses her belief, another named Lucinda is questioned, and a boy yells an accusation before she wakes, annoyed at the interruption. The blonde baby lies in her crib, thinking about her helplessness and wishing she'd accepted the holy water a priest offered her. A kind blonde woman asks if she wants to rest, but the baby internally screams that she wants to talk. The blonde woman smiles, promising to make some delicious rice right away. Thud, thud, thud. The sound startles the woman, who turns from her cooking to find the baby is now in a high chair. A leering man with his brown hair tied back grips the door and forces it open, greeting the blonde woman as Lucinda. Bang! Lucinda slams the door in his face and tells him to leave, but he just boasts that he's the richest man in the village. Lucinda weeps while holding the baby, lamenting how pitiful her life has become, while a memory of another woman comforting her plays out. Boom! With a shout of poo-poo, a small blue cat-like creature with horns and wings appears in a flash of brilliant light. The creature, Poo-Poo, explains it can only be handled by one of royal bloodline, as the baby realizes only she can see it and tries to give a command. Outside a rustic house, one voice declares the end of the Oat dynasty while another calls out for Errol. Lucinda tearfully embraces the crying baby Errol, reassuring her that her aunt is there to protect her. A stoic man with blue hair, wearing a dark cloak and uniform, arrives at the small house with a contingent of soldiers. A portrait shows a handsome man with black hair and green eyes, dressed in a formal, high-collared uniform. The blue-haired man reflects on his promise to devote his life to Tessa Illuminus, the illegitimate daughter beloved by the great Lloyd. He looks at the baby and blushes slightly, thinking to himself, "This kid." The blue-haired man leans over the high chair and addresses the baby as Tessa, asking why her eyes are sparkling. Overjoyed, the baby beams up at him and shouts, "Papa!" The baby, Tessa, reaches her arms out eagerly toward the blue-haired man, who watches her with a calm expression. The blue-haired man startles Lucinda by knowing the baby's name is Errol, and that she wants to get down, explaining her mythical beast told him. Lucinda wonders in shock how this man, Tessa, is able to hear poo-poo, while Errol reaches for her, telling her to trust him. Errol toddles forward and hugs Tessa's leg, calling him Papa and declaring that she needs to save her auntie. Tessa introduces his own mythical beast, Langleisha, a majestic white nine-tailed fox that appears beside him. Tessa decides it's time to leave, promising the baby no more oatmeal as she reaches for him from Lucinda's arms. Lucinda vows through her tears that she will protect Errol, while Tessa looks on in silence. Tessa points assertively at the blonde woman, demanding to know her name. She stammers that she is Lucinda. In a fine estate, men gossip about how Tessa Illuminus was the only one in her family who could control a certain power. Bang! One man slams a document on the table, stating they have another Tessa to eliminate, while others debate using her in a political marriage. They arrive at the magnificent Panorcus Palace, which is announced as the princess's new home. Inside, a stern woman named Fenril introduces herself as the head of staff and welcomes the princess, as Lucinda offers her thanks. Errol looks around her new, luxurious bedroom in utter amazement, thinking this is how royalty truly lives. Lucinda wonders aloud if this means Errol is first in line for the throne, while the baby happily crawls across the enormous bed. A stunning closet filled with sparkling dresses elicits an awestruck "Wah!" Now dressed in an adorable ruffled outfit, Errol is praised for looking so cute. With Poo-Poo perched on her head, Errol silently fumes over Fenril's condescending tone towards Lucinda, whom she considers a dirty extra. Fenril sharply corrects Lucinda, telling her to address the baby as princess, not Errol, and that she has no say in her education. To strengthen herself for Lucinda's sake, Errol takes her first steps in the garden with her aunt's help, calling out "Mama" as she toddles along. Lucinda praises her, but then flinches and formally calls her Princess Amelia, a change that visibly shocks the baby. Lucinda collapses in despair as the cruel laughter and insults of others echo around her, mocking her as an illiterate country bumpkin. Fenril struggles to handle the wailing baby, muttering about the pains of parenting as she pushes past a distraught Lucinda. As Lucinda walks down a long, empty hall, Errol's internal voice resolves that she must get her aunt out of this place. In a fiery flashback, the Imperial Palace burns, while a young dark-haired boy watches his nine-tailed beast rage out of control. The boy recalls his isolated past, never properly cared for or taught, and resentfully wonders why he should even bother. Surrounded by flames, the boy glares at those calling to him, wishing they would all die for not understanding his pain. A sweet flashback comic shows a 2-year-old girl named Tessa being incredibly clingy with her older brother, Lloyd. Back in the present, Errol throws a tantrum on the bed, demanding Lucinda do it properly, while also thinking it's better for her aunt to leave the palace. Heartbroken, Lucinda asks why Errol is saying such hurtful things, and how she could possibly abandon her. "Are you ashamed of me too?" Lucinda cries as Errol looks on with wide, solemn eyes. Errol finally breaks down into tears, blaming herself for making her aunt unhappy and calling herself a bad child. But Lucinda rushes to reassure her it isn't true. In her room, Lucinda weeps on the bed as an apologetic voice echoes in her mind. Fenrir recalls wanting Errol to be perfect to quell rumors, while Tessa realizes Fenrir's ambition blinded her to the princess's feelings, justifying her outburst. Preparing for a confrontation, Tessa enters a grand room to meet a man sitting in the distance. The older man, General Raphael, greets Tessa, saying he knew he'd come. Tessa acknowledges him as Your Majesty. Lucinda, holding a startled Errol, stands with Fenrir and a host of maids, all wondering what is happening. Errol recognizes the approaching General Raphael as a villain from her past life, babbling in alarm as he notices her. Lucinda explains that she cares for Errol as family, a statement General Raphael laughingly dismisses as modest. With a grand flourish, General Raphael takes Errol's hand and declares her the sole heiress of the empire. Smirking, the general presents a brilliant ring and asks if she recognizes it. Internally, Errol confirms that she does. "Papa!" Errol shouts, recognizing the ring as her dad's keepsake, which piques the general's interest. Errol's priority shifts as she calls for her mama, trying to get Lucinda's attention. With a menacing, snake-like aura, Raphael pressures her to speak, as Errol realizes she nearly fell into the cunning old man's trap. In a surprise move, Errol leaps forward and gives the startled general a free hug. General Raphael introduces his first son, Alexander, who he announces will be his successor. A handsome young man with bright blue hair enters, introducing himself as Alexander, Princess Amelia's new escort, and offers a charming grin. Waking alone, Errol anxiously calls for her mama, fearing Lucinda has fallen into another trap just as a hand reaches for her. Alexander gently lifts Errol from her bed, kindly asking if she's looking for her aunt. Errol observes that the handsome Alexander is nothing like his father, as he offers to tell her an interesting story to cure her boredom. As Alexander begins a fairy tale about a scary monster, Errol internally remarks that he's a funny young man. Outside, Tessa pauses, looking up at a figure in a high window with a sense of recognition. Alexander carries Errol down a hall, announcing their departure to the maids as the baby internally screams for him to stop. In an idealized vision, Tessa appears angelic and radiant. In the garden, Alexander and Errol happen upon Tessa and Lucinda, stopping the pair in their tracks. A romantic vision of Tessa and Lucinda together flashes through Errol's mind. Errol desperately tries to warn Alexander that Tessa and Lucinda are destined for an unhappy ending, but her baby talk fails to deliver the message. As the four sit for tea, Errol resolves that she must find a way to keep Tessa and Lucinda apart. Her plotting is momentarily derailed by the sight of a beautiful display of cakes and desserts. Noticing her expression, Alexander asks if she feels uncomfortable, but she only babbles in response. Alexander kindly reassures Lucinda that she's like a mother to the princess and has permission from the general to continue calling her Errol. Impressed, Lucinda thinks what a fine, handsome, and diplomatic man Alexander is, as he offers his full support as knight escort. Seeing Tessa look distraught, Errol silently pleads with him to feel at home in the palace. As Tessa and Lucinda bicker, Lucinda realizes he truly was searching for Errol, while Errol sighs in exasperation at their constant fighting. Reaching out with both hands, Errol grabs onto her caregivers, crying out, "Papa!" and "Mama!" Pictured happily between Tessa and Lucinda, Errol declares them a family. Filled with purpose, Errol decides it is her responsibility to find soulmates for both Tessa and Lucinda. In a dark room, a youth with brown hair and red eyes screams in anguish, blaming someone named Sika for their pain. A flashback reveals Mrs. Ricardo, an etiquette teacher who resents another's birth for ruining her chance to seduce Tessa. The red-eyed youth sits under a tree when a toddler, Errol, crawls toward him, calling him little boy. Fuming in her playroom, a frustrated Errol complains to her stuffed animal that her powerlessness makes her want to kill the Lord. While Fenrir reads a generic story about a prince and princess, a bored Errol wonders if her life is just a fairy tale. Done with stories, Errol demands to see Tessa, but Fenrir dismisses her, saying he's busy, which only annoys the princess. Frightened, Errol clings to a dark cloak and whimpers for her mama. A monstrous shadow looms behind a creepily smiling Fenrir, who declares the lesson over for the day. Errol finds her way to a room where a surprised Alexander, whom she calls Alec, picks her up. Errol adorably babbles at Alec, who she declares is number one, leaving him slightly confused. Her mood suddenly sours as she wonders why her dad is such a flirt. A frustrated outburst Alec misinterprets as simple agitation. Promising to return shortly, Alec leaves with a small pet, explaining she can't have them all. The scene shifts to an establishing shot of a massive, stately palace on a green hill. On a balcony, Alec points out the various royal residences to Errol, including the Emperor's Emerald Palace. As she waves goodbye, Errol thoughtfully considers that while Alec possesses high-level information, there's something more to him. Peeking from behind a chair, Errol's eyes widen as she spots a sparkling bag of treats, wondering what it could be. A man with spiky blue hair, holding Errol, is taken aback when she correctly identifies his snack as chocolate. With visions of chocolate squares in her eyes, Errol internally calculates its value as hundreds of servings of powdered oatmeal. The blue-haired man gently denies her, explaining that she's still too young to eat chocolate. Erupting with a dark aura, Errol silently demands he hand over the chocolate to avoid bloodshed. He relents, offering her a piece as a secret from Mrs. Peril, much to Errol's delight. With a smile, Errol happily accepts the piece of chocolate from his hand. Errol stares in disbelief as she finds Poo-Poo floating in a fountain, casually eating her hard-won chocolate. After Poo-Poo asks what the treat is, a furious Errol lunges and grabs her mythical beast, demanding to know where it's going with her food. Screaming in surprise, Errol is suddenly lifted into the air, still clinging tightly to Poo-Poo's wing. As Errol is carried away into the sky by Poo-Poo, the panicked blue-haired man rushes after her, shouting her title. Abandoned in a sun-dappled forest, Errol's thoughts drift to someone whose life was saved by chocolate. Her solitude is interrupted by the appearance of the red-eyed youth, who notices her and asks about her shoes. Errol cheerfully calls the startled boy pretty, causing magical flowers to bloom around them. The red-eyed youth violently rejects her touch, angrily shouting for her to get her hands off of him. As the boy cries out in confusion, Errol sees her chance to act. A memory reveals the boy's name is Sika, and Errol calls out to him. In a fading dream, Errol, called Ariel, sees her aunt in the distance but then finds herself completely alone. A lone warrior's silhouette stands against a turbulent sky, marking a transition in the story. In a stately room, a blue-haired woman frets to an older man that aligning with the princess is risky when the king already has an heir. The older man warmly greets a white-haired baby named Ian, held by the blue-haired woman who addresses the man as her father. Errol tugs on the spiky blue-haired man's shirt, earnestly calling him Alex and asking if he understands her feelings. Lucinda tearfully embraces Errol, confessing how worried she was and begging her never to get lost again. Tucking her in, Lucinda tells Errol a sad story about how her own drunken father once abandoned her older sister. Concluding her story, Lucinda explains she returned home to find her father gone and softly warns the sleeping Errol never to wander off alone. As Alexander offers to accompany them, Lucinda appears looking so beautiful that Errol internally cheers. Enjoying a piggyback ride from Alexander in a field of flowers, Errol declares him the best, while Lucinda praises his skill with children. After Lucinda assumes he has kids, Errol is momentarily shocked until Alexander clarifies he's single, prompting her relieved cheer. Alexander declares he's waiting for his fated person and playfully asks about Lucinda's plans, causing Errol to blush and feel flustered. As Alexander asks Lucinda about marriage, a smitten Errol points to her aunt, internally declaring her the one for him. A formally dressed and sparkling Tessa suddenly appears, causing Errol to wonder if it's her papa. Tessa explains he came because she was lonely, but his intense glare makes Errol suspect he's actually there to kill her. The scene shifts to a bright conservatory, where Lucinda, Alexander, and Tessa are having tea together. While drinking her bottle, Errol is startled by Tessa's intense, unwavering stare. Holding a fussy Errol, Lucinda confronts Tessa about his staring, demanding he explain if he has a problem with her. In the garden, Alexander shows a delighted Errol the beautiful flowers. Errol places a flower crown on a shocked Tessa's head as a stunned Alexander, holding another baby, looks on in disbelief. A gloomy atmosphere surrounds Tessa as he stands partially hidden by a tree, his presence unsettling Errol. Lucinda, looking radiant in a pink dress, curtsies and asks if Your Majesty called for her. Smiling, Lucinda leans over Tessa's desk and points to his work, making a suggestion about what would be most memorable for Errol. A sparkling Tessa lounges in a chair, unfazed as someone off-panel calls him a handsome bastard, while Errol grows annoyed at a swooning maid. Langlisha comments on Errol's sweet smell before suddenly letting out a massive roar of energy that shocks the baby. Amidst the blast, Alexander moves swiftly to shield Lucinda and Errol, with Poo-Poo protectively perched on his shoulder. Rumble! Langlisha greets the tiny Poo-Poo with a laugh, as Errol calls out to her small companion. As Lucinda pats her head, Errol calls out to her papa, Tessa, who remarks that the weak must strengthen their hearts to control their beasts. A maid announces the princess's audience with the emperor has been granted, and Errol marvels at the fairy tale carriage awaiting them. Poo-Poo zips through the trees at full speed with Errol clinging on, who screams for her companion to wait. Feeling queasy from the flight, Errol groans and begs Poo-Poo not to get sick. Flutter. Poo-Poo suddenly vanishes, leaving a wide-eyed Errol hovering unsupported in midair. Panicked, Errol screams as she begins to plummet from the sky. Rumble. As Sika glares, he is startled by the sudden appearance of Errol, who seems to recognize him. Errol gushes over how pretty and cute Sika is, while Poo-Poo wryly comments that its master is finally showing her true colors. Grinning, Errol offers the chocolate to Sika, completely ignoring a shouting Poo-Poo who feels left out. Visibly moved, Sika realizes it's the first time he's ever been called likable, a thought that makes Errol pensive. As Sika tearfully reflects that it's his first ever present, Errol scowls, wondering why his life is so pitiful. Blush. Errol's repeated declarations of like cause a flustered Sika to blush as magical flowers bloom around him. Flutter. Overcome with emotion, Sika suddenly hugs Errol, pleading for her to stop. Pat. Sika gently pats her head, telling her it's all right that he doesn't know her name. Badump! The gentle moment is shattered as a woman in a red dress appears, angrily demanding to know where Sika has been. The woman coldly scolds a terrified Sika, accusing him of roaming around and making a fool of her. In a tender moment, Lucinda hopes Errol will be a source of joy for others, and Errol feels their hearts connect. The scene fades, marking a pause in the story. Glare. Alexander desperately pleads with the princess, but she silently and intensely demands he give her something. Stop. An imposing woman in a black dress discovers Alexander and Errol on the floor and demands to know what he's doing. While a maid brushes her hair, Errol wonders if she is the emperor's most treasured, a thought a second maid finds strange. Errol internally gushes over Lucinda, thinking she looks impossibly beautiful in her formal dress. Shine. From her perspective, Errol gazes in awe at a magnificent, glittering ballroom filled with guests. Clench. Ignoring advice to act dignified, Errol resolves that her true mission for the day is to find a groom for her aunt. Errol waits eagerly for Lucinda, only to be confused when she arrives wearing her everyday dress. Errol mentally complains to a confused Lucinda, wondering why she didn't dress up more for the ball. Errol feels sad that Lucinda isn't the one shining beautifully, but Lucinda simply compliments the princess on her cute appearance. Lucinda smiles warmly, declaring she's already happy enough, a statement that leaves Errol speechless. Using Poo-Poo's magic, Errol floats through the ballroom, leaving the entire crowd, including Alexander and Lucinda, in stunned silence. Poo-Poo playfully blows the flower from Errol's hair, sending it floating away as she watches in surprise. The flower lands right on the face of a handsome green-haired man, and Errol looks on with delight. Hold! The handsome green-haired man catches the falling Errol, and both are surprised by the unexpected encounter. Flutter. He smiles and asks where she came from, and Errol is instantly smitten by his handsome face. Errol intently studies the man's face, comparing his looks to Tessa's, which makes him uncomfortable. Lucinda calls out to the Baron from the top of the stairs, but her sudden panic causes others to scream her name in alarm. Losing her balance, Lucinda tumbles down the grand staircase as people scream her name in horror. Swish! Lucinda lands with unexpected grace, prompting a bewildered Errol to wonder if her aunt is an assassin. Hugs tight. A relieved Lucinda crushes Errol in a hug, while the baby can only think about how much it hurts. Beau. The handsome man formally introduces himself as Baron Pietro, explaining he recently inherited his title. Pietro then asks for Lucinda's name, and she hesitates for a moment before answering. Burst. Fenrir and a group of maids rush in frantically, demanding to know if the princess is all right. Done. Tessa makes a grand entrance, addressed as Your Majesty, and Errol internally panics at his sudden appearance. Glance. Tessa and Errol exchange a look. Errol worries her matchmaking plan isn't ready, while Tessa notes Pietro's presence. Tessa lifts Errol, blaming the incident on Poo-Poo's prank, and the baby babbles her agreement. Holding Errol, Tessa thanks Baron Pietro and promises a reward, though Pietro feels he was only doing what was necessary. Blush. Tessa instructs a blushing Lucinda to prepare herself again, and she readily agrees to his command. Flutter. As Lucinda walks away, Errol is mesmerized by her radiant hair, finding its beauty almost blinding. Sparkle. Lucinda is left speechless as she opens a box to reveal a magnificent new dress and shoes. Lucinda hesitates, thinking such a fine dress is impractical for childcare, and a privilege she only has because of Errol. Pietro suddenly stands and shocks a surprised Lucinda by recounting a story of a child who fell from the second floor. Pietro continues the high society tale, explaining rumors that the mother in the story became an etiquette teacher, which makes Lucinda thoughtful. Though she's forgotten his name, Lucinda politely suggests she'll confirm his story with Fenrir, a response Pietro finds kind. Baron Pietro reintroduces himself, prompting Lucinda to state her name and that she is about to receive the surname Janin. Sparkle. Carrying Errol, Tessa majestically enters a grand hall where he is formally greeted as Your Majesty. As Tessa commands the awestruck nobles to rise, Errol is internally blown away by how awesome he is. Appear. Poo-Poo pops up to take all the credit, while Errol internally reminds herself who the idiot was that dropped her. Poo-Poo is suddenly snatched up, letting out a surprised meow. Tessa holds Errol and dangles a struggling Poo-Poo by its neck, awkwardly trying to present the scene. The crowd gasps, recognizing Poo-Poo as a divine beast, confirming the rumors about Tessa, while Errol wonders why they can suddenly see her companion. Shine. Errol, now wearing a tiny, sparkling crown, sits serenely in her frilly pink dress. Blink. As Tessa gently places the crown on her head and remarks that it will fit soon, Errol thinks his name. Errol internally calls Tessa an idiot for his devotion to his brother and niece before softly calling him Papa. Badump. Errol declares she likes this warm side of her Papa, and her affection makes Tessa's heart skip a beat. Clap, 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 clap. As the crowd applauds, Errol makes a heartfelt wish for her and her uncle to live happily together. A stern Alexander threatens to confiscate a year's worth of chocolate from the princess, earning a pout from a horrified Errol. Alexander playfully asks if she likes him, his majesty, or chocolate more, and Errol enthusiastically chooses chocolate, making him laugh. Tessa's eye flashes with irritation at being passed over for chocolate, and a dark, blazing aura erupts around him. The story pauses on a promotional image featuring various characters. The scene shifts to a grand, sparkling ballroom where nobles are gracefully dancing. As two men dance, one with short, brownish-blonde hair asks his gray-haired partner, "Madam?" "Dudon." Lucinda and Tessa sit on thrones, holding Errol as an off-panel voice entreats the gathered people to approach, promising not to bite. The woman in the red dress makes a gorgeous entrance, coolly stating that it's been a while. When Tessa claims he doesn't recall granting an audience, the woman humbly explains her urgency, intriguing a watchful Errol. The woman suggests Errol needs a nanny despite Mrs. Fenrill's etiquette lessons, causing Lucinda to look shocked as the woman smiles slyly. Tessa coldly dismisses her, stating even a beggar would be a better choice, and tells her to leave, causing the woman to flush with anger. Grit. The woman angrily protests her treatment as a faithful servant of the late Emperor Lloyd, but Tessa furiously orders her not to speak his brother's name. After the woman apologizes, a confused Errol wonders about her connection to the late Emperor Lloyd. Whisper. Alexander explains to a lady that the woman was Emperor Lloyd's mistress, advising she is not good to associate with, as Errol connects the name Ricardo to Sika. A cunning General Raphael suddenly appears, startling Errol, who finds Tessa's throne beside her is now empty. Disgusted, Errol babbles at General Raphael, who just cackles, delighted that she remembers him. Squirm! General Raphael greets Lucinda as Baroness Janan, much to a confused Errol's surprise as she squirms in his arms. Boom. General Raphael introduces a small, white-haired boy named Rian, who shyly greets the princess, causing a blushing Errol to be instantly captivated. Clop. A lone carriage travels through a dark forest at night, as someone considers what will happen if a certain child is gone. Shine. The view shifts to the awe-inspiring, glowing interior of a grand cathedral. In a flashback, the woman in the red dress coldly tells a young Sika he should understand how much she lost due to his birth. Stating his purpose is to disappear, she menacingly lifts the terrified boy into the air. As Sika desperately pleads for his mother, promising to behave, the woman turns her back on him. Shove. Sika is pushed into a dark pit, his final cry for his mother echoing as he falls. An unseen person lets out a mischievous chuckle in an ornate pink bedroom filled with toys. Errol smiles smugly, recalling how all the handsome nobles, including Baron Pietro, were captivated by Lucinda. Errol babbles at Alexander, demanding chocolate as payment for poo-poo, but he just laughs and refuses. Fenrill suggests Errol needs a friend, but Alexander is skeptical. Fenrill argues Errol is mature for her age, and the baby ponders the idea. A young, dark-haired man with green eyes timidly clutches a pink teddy bear, wondering if this is all he has to do. An aide informs a blue-haired youth that a woman has one last thing to say before she leaves the palace for good. A brown-haired woman emotionally tells the angry youth her son has died, and the late emperor's child is gone, leaving her with no one. Glare. The youth furiously accuses the woman of misrepresenting his brother's generosity as love and threatens her for claiming the child was his. A startled blonde woman holding a teddy bear overhears the other woman discussing remarriage right after her son's death and demanding money to leave. Awoo. A giant white wolf suddenly materializes with a growl, shocking the brown-haired woman. Wah! A baby Errol throws a tantrum, babbling a desperate prayer for storybook time to end. Lucinda finds a babbling Errol pretending to be asleep, remarking she heard she dozed off, while Errol internally celebrates her tactic's success. Lucinda tells a surprised Errol that she spoke with His Majesty and believes he wants to become closer to her. Errol urgently asks Poo-Poo about Sika, and is horrified to learn he's been locked in the basement for so long that he's near death. Slam. A pink pillow is thrown directly at Poo-Poo's face. A weak and terrified Sika kneels in the darkness, faintly calling out that he's there. Drip! Surrounded by a glow of flowers, Errol calls Sika's name, and the tearful boy looks up, wondering who she is. Alexander and Lucinda discuss how Sika ended up where he was, while Errol realizes with a start that Sika was never in the original story. Lucinda mentions hearing that Mrs. Ricardo's son had died, but Errol internally clarifies that he's alive, realizing the rumor was a lie. Alexander tells a worried Lucinda that he will stand guard in front of the door to make sure everything is all right. Surrounded by a floral aura, Alexander confidently reassures Lucinda that not sleeping for a week is no big deal for him. Errol cheerfully babbles that she likes Sika, leaving a blushing Lucinda momentarily speechless. Lucinda emotionally thanks Errol for growing up so beautifully, seeing her affection for others as a sign of maturity. Sika, now in Errol's bed, stares at her with his red eyes and wonders what is happening. Lucinda calmly introduces herself as Errol's aunt to a wary Sika, explaining that he is in the princess's room. As Errol sweetly babbles her name, a thoughtful Sika repeats it, a spark of recognition in his eyes. Wham! The realization hits Sika as he covers his mouth in shock, gasping the word princess. Sokka panics at the sudden appearance of a princess, internally blaming someone for this disastrous turn of events as Errol looks on, confused. Lucinda gently tells Sika that he's just a young child and advises him to eat well and become healthy so he won't have to listen to such things. Alexander explains to Errol that Mrs. Ricardo claimed Sika was Emperor Lloyd's child right after he died, which confuses Errol, who never met Lloyd. Drawing back the bed curtains, Alexander tells a recovering Sika that the choice of what to do next is his. In a special comic, Errol insists Sika stay, so they decide to find him new clothes, but Lucinda only offers Errol's frilly dresses, horrifying Sika. In a closing panel, a man tells someone to let him go if they've walked further, while another declares he won't waste time on such thoughts. A blue-haired woman tells an older man that the child is Mrs. Ricardo's son, though she doesn't know the full story. With a fierce glare and a flower in her hair, Errol sternly commands someone to go. Errol angrily tells Alexander to go, insisting she gets to decide her own sadness while he is stunned by her fly-swatting gesture. Lucinda gently chides a pouting Errol for her anger towards Alexander, then later thanks him for his help with Sika. Alexander asks Lucinda if she was worried about him, and as she hesitates, Errol watches them suspiciously, sensing a subtle shift in the air. Errol offers a heartfelt apology to a surprised Alexander, sweetly asking to reconcile. Alexander remarks that the princess feels more mature than him, noting her rapid speech development, while Errol internally fumes at being called a kid. A shower of colorful wax-sealed letters falls through the air. Alexander, holding a sleeping Errol, observes the huge pile of letters, while another person wonders how they will manage so many. Sorting through the mail, Alexander efficiently discards letters, including one from a man known for his complicated relationships, impressing Lucinda. Alexander politely asks to look at a letter Lucinda is holding, and she shyly agrees while Errol puffs out her cheeks. Alexander suggests Lucinda consider marrying Count Marlin for her future and to support the princess, but Lucinda admits she isn't ready. Lucinda asks Errol if she wants her to get married, and the baby enthusiastically agrees, wanting her aunt to find her own happiness. Alexander smiles warmly and declares his devotion to the princess, stating his desire is to do whatever she wishes. Two palace aides gossip about how Lucinda has become the most popular person at court, receiving countless proposals and fellowship applications. A hopeful, brown-haired man in a green coat is shown to have gathered his courage to write a letter. Triumphant. Errol sits on a grand red throne with a pacifier, her matchmaking plan finally set in motion. Errol oversees Lucinda's first blind date with Count Marlin's son, silently cheering her aunt on. A bonus comic reveals Errol got her pacifier after her persistent finger-sucking drove a flustered Fenrir to abandon her anti-pacifier stance. An off-panel voice calls for Baroness Janin as Lucinda turns, looking radiant in a new dress. As an aide promises all gifts will be delivered, Errol is comically overwhelmed by a mountain of presents from her many admirers. Lucinda nervously stands before a suitor, recalling the many proposals she's received before gathering the courage to make a request. A stunned, dark-haired man listens as Lucinda asks him to teach her how to read and write. Lucinda shyly explains that caring for Errol and learning etiquette left no time to learn to read, while the man listens intently. Blushing with embarrassment over a slip of the tongue, Lucinda apologizes profusely, as the man seems lost in thought, staring at her blonde hair. Baron Pietro greets Baroness Janin by kissing her hand, joking that he needs to exercise in case he has to catch a flying princess again. Tessa, surrounded by a red aura, angrily questions if his orders are unreasonable, while Alexander retorts that he may be viewing things from his past self. A maid announces the Emperor's arrival, shocking Errol, Poo-Poo, Pietro, and Alexander. Fenrir questions Baron Pietro's sudden appearance, and a maid explains he came to cheer on the princess's first language lesson. Nien. Tessa summons his own mystical beast, a white creature that looks like Poo-Poo's twin, startling Lucinda and Errol. Poo-Poo shrieks in terror, calling Tessa a poo-poo killer, while Pietro marvels at its ability to speak. Alexander then requests a private audience. Tessa coldly demands to know why Alexander is protecting Secca, and Alexander calmly replies that it was the princess's wish. Alexander explains his conflicting orders, Tessa's to be Errol's sword and Errol's to save Secca, causing Tessa's eye to flash with red anger. A clash of power erupts as Tessa's red aura collides with Alexander's blue energy. Tessa condescendingly calls Alexander a doll without a will of his own, enraging him by asking if his father sent him to annoy him. Glowing with intense blue energy, Alexander declares that he, too, wanted to follow someone of his own free will. Errol's eyes widen in disbelief as she internally rejects Alexander's reasoning. Errol furiously screams that she hates Papa, startling a shocked Tessa. She then yells that she hates Al too, causing Alexander to recoil as if he's been physically struck. Internally, Errol's thoughts rage against Tessa for ordering Secca's death and against Alexander for defying the Emperor. Alexander leaps through a chaotic explosion of red and blue energy, launching an attack. A shocked Tessa exclaims in disbelief as Alexander, shrouded in blue flames, questions the strange energy and calls out for Langrisa. Holding a terrified doll-like baby, a blonde woman is enveloped in a red aura as she proclaims she can feel the child's immense energy. The blonde woman, now clearly Lucinda, holds the stiff-looking Errol and angrily demands to know what is happening. Lucinda forcefully tells the two men to reconcile and shake hands, leaving a stunned Tessa and Alexander with red marks on their foreheads. Alexander meekly apologizes to Her Highness for his imprudence and asks for punishment, while Tessa remains silent. Tessa stares in alarm, calling out for Lucinda and questioning her strange behavior. At Lucinda's command to hug her, a surprised Errol is presented to Tessa. Shriek! Errol lets out a terrified scream as she is moved towards Tessa. Tessa now holds a wide-eyed Errol, the two of them surrounded by a shower of sparkling flowers. Lucinda gently advises Tessa that he shouldn't speak carelessly, as Princess Errol understands what adults say. After Tessa asks if she truly cares for him, Errol's thoughts confirm it, leading him to realize it must be true. The scene shifts to a serene, sun-dappled forest, glittering with light. An off-screen voice expresses disbelief at seeing Tessa sitting alone at a beautiful garden breakfast. As Lucinda approaches with Errol, a flustered Tessa protests, insisting he is not what she thinks. Lucinda reassures Tessa, telling him not to worry about Errol's reaction as she's too young to remember these events. Tessa informs a concerned Errol that Secca will be sent north with a guardian, explaining it's better than being used by the Raffaelso. Admitting he was also nearly used by the Raffaelso, Tessa apologizes for losing control of his emotions, and Errol looks at him with newfound understanding. Errol sweetly asks a question from her high chair, seeking approval. Tessa coaxes Errol, asking her to admit she really likes him and to call him uncle. Tessa summons Langrisa, his massive white beast materializing behind him with a powerful roar. Errol cheekily tells her uncle that he must like her dad, while a squished poo-poo grumbles that he hates her the most. Tessa recalls Errol wanting to leave and realizes she was instinctively trying to escape his miserable influence, causing a dark aura to form around him. Offering to make her a Grand Duchess, Tessa tells Errol to live far away, and she considers that leaving might be for the best. Errol reaches out and makes a pinky promise with Tessa, desperately pleading with him not to push her away. In a tender moment, Errol's small hand holds onto Tessa's finger, framed by lush green leaves. Wham! A document is slammed down on a table, as someone yells to be let go. Now a bit older, Errol happily snuggles an annoyed-looking poo-poo, the narrator commenting on how lovely she is. A large white beast observes that its owner seems to be preparing something, while a curious Errol questions her uncle. A massive, sparkling pile of birthday gifts and teddy bears appears, startling someone off-panel. A group of handsome young men in pristine uniforms smile brightly as they welcome the princess. Tessa hands a slightly older Errol a document, telling her to play somewhere else as she wonders what it is. Seated at his desk, Tessa curtly dismisses a topic, stating that the conversation is over. While Lucinda fixes her hair, Errol complains that her uncle is a fool for his niece, and Lucinda smiles at their close relationship. Bam! Errol confidently declares her one demand. She wants a younger sibling. Errol lists the qualifications for Tessa's future partner: kind, merciful, and easygoing, noting he is none of those things, leaving him looking troubled. Tessa coldly states that since it's a marriage she wants, she should leave if she has nothing else to say, leaving Errol speechless. A line of suitors asks Errol how she will choose the new empress from among them. Alexander explains to Errol that since the nobles are too afraid of Tessa to mention marriage, she is the only one who can. Errol excitedly demands to know someone's ideal type. Clarifying her question, Errol asks what kind of face he wants for a partner, baffling Tessa and the other men present. When Tessa claims to have no preference, Errol challenges him, asking if a beard and a unibrow are acceptable, forcing him to reconsider. Pressing him to remember what he finds beautiful, Errol realizes with a jolt that Tessa does have someone in mind. Tessa finally admits his type, someone with dark hair who is tall and looks strong, as a masculine silhouette appears in his mind. Lucinda, holding a book, informs Tessa that Errol is very serious about this, and he'll be speechless when he sees the application form she's prepared. Lucinda admits she's always embarrassed in front of Errol, while Tessa looks at her, lost in thought. As Lucinda's beauty captivates him, Tessa internally admits he gets flustered by pretty things. While Lucinda arranges flowers, her shimmering blonde hair captures Tessa's full attention. As their eyes meet, Tessa thinks she's pretty, then asks if he should continue writing from where they left off. Sitting formally at a table, Tessa looks down and addresses someone as Your Highness. An off-panel voice summons Poo-Poo, who awakens from a nap beside Errol and grumpily declares he doesn't come just because he's called. Poo-Poo suggests Errol just pick a spouse for her uncle randomly, but Errol sits up in outrage, insisting her uncle's happiness is at stake. Pointing out that the Emperor's own opinion isn't being considered, Poo-Poo leaves Errol speechless with the sudden realization. Now a toddler in a red dress, Errol reaches out her arms and demands a hug from a surprised Alexander. Alexander gently holds the small princess, comforting her as she rests on his shoulder. Errol asks Alexander why he broke up with someone, and he explains his father told him to, causing Errol to groan internally about Raffaello. Alexander recounts how his father's predictions always came true, except for the Emperor, whom he met living alone in a rundown palace. He recalls the unbending look in the young Emperor's eyes, a memory that has stayed with him as Errol listens intently. Alexander admits he has feelings for the Emperor, but Errol shrewdly observes that Al always gets emotional when it comes to her uncle. Clinging to him tightly, Errol demands lots of hugs now, knowing she won't be able to ask for them much longer as she grows up. Alexander holds her close, sadly thinking it's a shame that the princess is growing up so quickly. The two share a warm, sparkling embrace. Holding Errol, Alexander affectionately calls her stupid for only now realizing his feelings. Errol challenges Tessa, asking what he'd do if she told him to marry anyone, and he calmly replies it would just create another miserable woman. When Tessa asks why she is pushing love on him and questions what love even is, Errol internally fumes at his cluelessness. Now 6 years old, Errol tries to explain love as a ticklish feeling that makes you want to do everything for someone, leaving Tessa to ponder her words. Errol passionately declares that when her uncle finally finds someone, he will regret his current cynical attitude, stunning him into silence. Tessa suddenly asks why she's looking at him that way, and a tearful Errol nervously stammers his name. Reclining in a chair, Tessa reassures her, saying he's perfectly fine just having her by his side. In the sitting room, Alexander confronts Tessa about his harsh treatment, but Tessa dismisses him, referencing an older brother's advice to find love after marriage. Errol reminds Tessa he once told her he liked her most in the world, warning him to be careful with his words as he grimaces. Tessa dismisses her matchmaking as a hobby born of boredom, while a 6-year-old Errol tries to retort with childlike mispronunciations. As Lucinda tucks a yawning Errol into bed, Errol claims she's tired from working so hard, and Lucinda tells her they'll start tomorrow. Errol and Tessa preside over a meeting, where the attendees praise the princess and she boldly declares she's looking forward to the future. Clinging to Tessa's back, Errol playfully claims him, declaring that her uncle has to marry her because he is hers. A monochromatic flashback shows a woman reading, with narration about a love that filled everything from spring to winter. A dark-haired man with a menacing red aura decides someone's manners need fixing, as a terrified Poo-Poo hides behind an embarrassed Errol. While Errol comforts a crying Poo-Poo, Tessa looks down at his own beast, Langleisha, and comments that it is equally lacking. Errol smushes Poo-Poo's face, demanding he stop being shy and tell her everything while the little beast struggles desperately. ZZZT. Errol is engulfed in a brilliant flash of red and white light. The scene shifts to a peaceful, sunlit meadow of yellow flowers as Errol's voice wonders where she is. Errol's eyes widen as she sees a small, adorable, white-haired boy, and she is instantly smitten. Now having a picnic, Errol asks the boy where they are as he politely pours her a cup of tea. Errol brightly explains that they met when they were young through General Raffaello, adding she couldn't forget how pretty he was. A blond man in a military uniform looks mortified, wishing to turn to dust, as Langleisha explains that the little one caused trouble by whining to use magic. A man with dark blue hair and glowing red eyes is surrounded by a sinister aura, contemplating whether he should just destroy everything. His beast, a white fox with red eyes, encourages his dark thoughts, agreeing that burning everything would lead to greater bloodshed. The scene changes to show a radiant Lucinda standing gracefully in a garden setting. Tessa asks Lucinda if she's worried, and she admits she is, fearing Errol is too shocked and afraid of being scolded to return. Errol, now in a cute pink strawberry dress, is surprised to find that this mysterious place seems to have all sorts of clothes. She then enthusiastically praises Alexander as a good and strong person, making him blush. The white-haired boy appears and says hello, causing Errol to gasp in shock. General Raphael arrives with Rianne, the white-haired boy, and asks the princess for a moment of her time, while also questioning a tense Alexander. Wow! The group enters a magnificent playroom filled with toy soldiers and a pool table. Errol complains that her uncle only buys her dolls when she wants to play soldier, just as Rianne's attention is caught by the mention of a teddy bear. Outraged that Ryan's bear was taken, Errol furiously demands to know who did it, learning from the boy that it was his grandfather. Rianne shyly asks Errol if she can visit his house every day so he can see Poo-Poo more often, leaving her momentarily speechless. Holding his hands, Errol sweetly tells Rianne that she likes him, and asks if he can come live with her instead. General Raphael asks Lucinda if Tessa trusts him, and she replies with certainty that he must believe the general won't harm the princess. General Raphael advises Lucinda to secure her standing by marrying into a powerful house, noting her vulnerability, but she insists her place is beside her niece. A bright yellow and black promotional screen asks readers to support the official comic release. The blue-haired woman brings in a tray of delicious-looking desserts, asking what the two were talking about as Errol's eyes go wide with delight. Lucinda notices Errol's expression has suddenly darkened and calls out her name with concern. Hiding behind a curtain, Errol announces her intention to return to the palace, but General Raphael pleasantly suggests she stay for about a week. Leaning closer, General Raphael asks a startled Errol if she is also scared of him. Surrounded by a powerful aura, General Raphael questions why His Highness would appoint his son as the precious princess's escort knight. Tessa internally questions the general's motives, wondering if he is trying to separate them, test their trust, or use Errol to manipulate him. Errol tells the general that while her uncle may dislike him, he also trusts him, and the old man finds her words amusingly familiar. Pointing forward with conviction, Errol declares that she knows the quote, do anything to harm the nation. General Raphael bids a warm farewell, telling the princess it was an honor to serve her and inviting her to visit again anytime. A horse-drawn carriage makes its way down a country road against the backdrop of a beautiful orange sunset. While watching Errol sleep, Lucinda reflects that she's the one who relies on the princess, feeling anxious whenever Errol is out of her sight. Giving a thumbs up, Alexander tells Lucinda he can read her like a book, but an annoyed Errol lying on her lap insists that he cannot. Poof! Poo-Poo materializes on Errol's head, complaining about being summoned without chocolate, and she retorts that he needs to lose some weight. Meower! Poo-Poo panics on Errol's head, crying for help and thinking he's going to be killed, as she struggles and tells the lump to get off her neck. Whoosh! As Lucinda and Alexander urge the panicking familiar to calm down, It launches itself off Errol's head in a chaotic streak of light. Snatch! In a flash, Alexander pulls Lucinda into his arms to shield her from the flying beast. Phew, breathing a sigh of relief after the close call, Alexander asks the dazed Lady Janin if she is all right. Alexander gently strokes Lady Janin's cheek as they share a tender, romantic moment surrounded by flowers. Squeeze! The moment is broken when Lady Janin realizes their proximity and, with a blush, shoves him away. Alexander reassures a blushing Lady Janin that he isn't offended, which only makes her and a secretly watching Errol blush harder. Alexander explains he was just worried about the princess's aunt, and he and Lucinda share a laugh. Errol and Poo-Poo are flabbergasted that Alexander didn't confess his love, while Lucinda looks on, flustered and confused. Lucinda thanks Alexander for his help, while Thunk, a dejected and mission-failed Errol faceplants behind them. Clunk. The scene shifts to the group inside a carriage as a horse neighs, signaling their departure. A tearful young man in a red jacket scolds Errol for disappearing, making her promise it will never happen again as other servants wail behind them. A white fox informs Errol that her property is wind, leaving a baffled Poo-Poo to question how someone can own the wind. Tessa approaches a giggling Errol and asks if she was worried about him. With a happy cry, Errol rushes forward and gives Tessa a big hug around his leg. Pointing to herself expectantly, Errol looks up at a sweating Tessa, who nervously asks if she means him. Cackling maniacally, Errol grabs Poo-Poo and smothers him in a hug while the terrified beast also asks, "Me?" Boom! Tessa coldly declares he has no intention of having a child, instantly crushing Errol's dream of getting a younger sibling. Shout! Errol frantically demands to know where Lucinda and Al went, and a nervous Poo-Poo stammers that they went to the garden. Under the light of a full moon, Alexander and Lucinda stand together in a romantic garden gazebo. Badum. Her heart pounding with excitement, Errol peeks over a hill with Poo-Poo, eager to witness their love story unfold. In a brief flashback, a maid asks a younger General Raphael, who is holding a puppy, if he'd like to give it some milk. Shalala! As Alexander smiles gently, a montage of Errol's adorable and happy moments as a growing child flashes through his mind. Lucinda tells a fidgety and anxious Alexander that they should go after her. Looking at him with pleading eyes, Lucinda begs Alexander not to let Errol down. Dash! Vowing to himself, Alexander turns and runs determinedly into the moonlit forest. Sprint! He races onward, resolving to protect the princess even if his own father orders him to get rid of her. Flash with fierce resolve in his eyes, Alexander decides he would rather be dead than obey such a command. In the dark woods, Errol sits alone and dejected at the base of a large, leafy tree. Shun Alexander suddenly appears before Errol, stating it's his duty to protect her, but she huffily replies that she's still on palace grounds anyway. Holding Errol, Alexander tells her she is safe neither in the palace nor in the Raffaello home. A close-up shows Errol's delighted and innocent giggle. Bottom. Alexander promises Errol she is safe as long as she stays close to him, making her heart pound. Wah. Errol cries that he's wasting his talent and asks if he'll marry, but he calmly replies that he doesn't need to since he has Rianne. Alexander offers to let someone stronger take his duties if they come along, leaving Errol to gasp in surprise. Errol explains she just doesn't want him to miss out on life because of her, and Alexander rewards her concern with a warm, beaming smile. In a sepia flashback, Errol wants to watch Alexander train. Whoosh! He mercilessly defeats an opponent, his eyes blazing as others comment on his ferocity. The scene shifts to a snowy encampment, where a brown-haired youth sweeps as others train, and an unknown voice wonders who the kid is. Back in the present, a green-haired Pietro excitedly asks if they're discussing Lady Janin, while Errol looks on with an unamused expression. Pietro eagerly suggests having tea with Lady Janin, but Errol slyly reminds him they have a lot of studying to do. Pietro offers to take the day off, and Errol seizes the opportunity, running to find her Auntie Lucinda for tea. Pietro asks Lucinda if she knows the poet Gibran, and she demurely replies that she only knows of his famous works. While Pietro praises her literary knowledge, Lucinda explains she only studied it to have something to talk about with the princess. Clap. Pietro enthusiastically suggests he and Lucinda study together after lessons. an idea Errol eagerly supports while a confused Lucinda looks on. The scene changes to Tessa at his desk, who calmly asks for Lady Janine, causing two nearby guards to flinch and scramble to find her. One of the guards addresses Tessa as Your Majesty, confirming his high rank as he looks on with an impassive expression. Chills fill the air as dark ink drips from Tessa's pen, betraying his barely contained irritation. Returning to the garden, Pietro tells a confused Lucinda that he was just thinking out loud. Errol confronts Alexander, disappointed that he doesn't seem to care for her uncle, and he concedes she's right, though his duty is to her. Surrounded by flowers, Errol thinks to herself how much she missed her Uncle Tessa. HMPH. Tessa suddenly appears, sardonically asking if she missed his evil eyes, and revealing he overheard everything. Teehee? Errol brightly tells him she is learning archaism, and he listens with a pensive expression. Halt! Tessa stops her mid-sentence to suggest getting rid of her literature lessons for good, leaving her completely stunned. Squeeze! As she clutches his clothes, Tessa explains that without lessons, Pietro wouldn't need to live at the palace, and Errol notes his evil eyes are back. Nope! Errol defiantly rejects his idea, declaring she can't give up on her future uncle and wants to learn more. Wine! She throws her arms around Tessa, insisting she loves literature and wants to keep learning as he looks on, speechless. Watching Tessa stand lonely by the window, Errol wonders if he dislikes Baron Pietro, but then reasons he wouldn't have allowed him in otherwise. Flare! A menacing red aura erupts around Tessa as he coldly orders Alexander to take 10 steps back. Back in the study, Errol asks a sweating Tessa why he flinched, and he nervously claims he just felt a chill. A shocked Errol listens as Tessa internally muses that Lucinda will never meet anyone new because she is always stuck by his side. Eek! Two servants whisper in disbelief about the princess's bold words to his majesty, and an overheating Errol wishes she could take it all back. Gah. Multiple panicked versions of Errol flee in terror from a very calm-looking Alexander. To avoid answering Tessa's question, Errol loudly offers to get him a blanket for the cold, leaving him and his guard baffled. Errol asks Alexander why his nephew Rian has the Raffaello name, and he explains his sister married his father's aide, and they live together. Alexander further explains that due to his own low chance of reproduction, his father adopted his son-in-law, prompting a sarcastic thought from Errol. While Alexander believes his father's decision brought peace to the family, Errol shakes her head, silently disagreeing. Flutter! The scene shifts to a beautiful, smiling Lucinda standing amidst a shower of flower petals. As Tessa grits his teeth, he wonders aloud if Lucinda is the reason he's been so cranky lately. Flush! A wave of mutual attraction washes over Lucinda and a blushing Tessa, who are both surrounded by a romantic floral aura. Lucinda asks a pouting Errol what she was up to behind her back, and Errol plays innocent while Lucinda notes her inquisitive expression. Ta-da! Lucinda presents a chocolate, guessing it's what Errol wanted, while Errol inwardly sighs that her aunt still sees her as a baby. Errol takes the precious chocolate, but snatch. Tessa's cat-like beast swoops in and steals it, looking absolutely ecstatic. While Lucinda gasps in shock as Errol lets out an ear-splitting scream of rage at the thieving cat. As Lucinda watches with concern, Errol sobs that chocolate is her only treat and calls the beast mean for taking it. Pat Rian gently pats a crying Errol's head and asks to see what's wrong. Sparkle! He opens a large box filled with an incredible assortment of beautiful desserts and suggests they take it outside. Errol drools at the sight, remembering she was only promised one treat, as a blue-haired woman laughs and explains Ryan insisted on getting everything. Wish! Overcome with pure joy, Errol throws her arms wide in celebration. Grab Alexander catches Errol, advising her to refrain from using such words about his nephew, as she asks how long he was there. With a serious expression, Alexander recalls the day Errol said she liked him the most, and a curious Errol asks him what happened. Wah! Errol shakes a flustered Alexander, demanding to know what happened, while Lucinda and the blue-haired woman agree that the two seem very close. Beam! Surrounded by sparkling flowers, Rian gives a sweet, radiant smile. The group enjoys a peaceful afternoon, having tea together under a large, shady tree. As Errol enjoys her snacks, Poo-Poo appears and projects a thought, insisting he was only worried about her health. Squeeze! Errol joyfully hugs Poo-Poo, calling him a cute little demon as Lucinda claps, finding the moment touching. In a sepia-toned scene, young men in uniform discuss how Alexander was ordered by His Majesty to run all day, pitying him for his unknown transgression. Dudun. Rian asks Princess Errol if she studies too, leaving her momentarily stunned and speechless. Wah! Errol passionately declares that Rian is a human who needs freedom, but he innocently replies that he doesn't mind, thinking he has too much. Leaning in close, Errol frets over how Rian will survive with such a strict upbringing, causing him to blush. Gasp. Alexander suddenly appears looking horrified, prompting Errol to ask why he looks as if he just saw her uncle. Boom! Dudun! Tessa appears with a menacing red aura, shocking everyone as he is identified as Errol's uncle. Tessa sternly asks Errol what he told her when granting his permission, but she plays dumb. Poof! As poo-poo materializes on Errol's head, Tessa recalls his strict 1-hour rule for her playdate. Glare! Tessa coldly informs them that Rian's hour was up ages ago, prompting Errol to accuse him of spying. Errol sweetly pleads with a stone-faced Tessa to restart the hour, but he flatly denies her request. Yell! Errol points accusingly at Tessa, arguing that a child who only plays with adults won't develop proper social skills. When Tessa retorts that she isn't very childlike, Errol passionately insists she needs to play with peers for her emotional development. Boom! Alexander declares that Errol wins the argument, as a defeated Tessa falls to his knees in front of her. Rian asks Errol why her playtime is so short, worriedly asking if he got scolded for playing with her, which she frantically denies. Ahem. Errol sheepishly claims that her uncle simply wants her to play with him instead, which surprises Rian. Grasp. Alexander catches a stumbling Errol, warning her to be careful as she grabs onto him, demanding an explanation. Squeal. Errol's mood instantly brightens as she realizes it must be her uncle's birthday, much to Alexander's dismay. Plop Errol hops down and runs off, excitedly shouting about her uncle's birthday as Alexander tries to stop her. Alexander gently stops Errol, gravely telling her that they do not celebrate it, but she just asks why not. Whimper. Errol's eyes well up with tears as she processes the sad news. Rian kindly tells a dejected Errol that she can tell him anything, admitting she knows so much more than he does. Blush. Holding her hands, Rian shyly confesses that he likes her, and they both blush amidst a field of flowers. Dangle. A young girl hangs upside down from her bed, explaining to an unseen person that she is thinking. Still upside down, the girl asks Lucinda for her birthday, and Lucinda looks on, wondering why she is asking. Flail! Lucinda playfully tackles and tickles the laughing girl, exclaiming that her baby is all grown up. Cling. Holding the little girl close, Lucinda reveals her birthday is in August, and the girl confirms that's in the summer. Lucinda asks about the sudden question, and the little girl explains it's because Uncle Tessa's birthday is coming up. Stroke. Lucinda gently strokes the girl's hair, reassuring her that Tessa will be happy no matter what she does for him. The girl worries about making him sad, but Lucinda encourages her, saying she has a gift for making people feel better. Ta-da! A newly inspired Errol jumps up, ready for action. Squeal. Errol's mind races with extravagant party plans, prompting a nervous voice to suggest keeping the surprise to a minimum. Lucinda compliments a child's drawing on a gift, calling it a pretty pig, but Errol dryly corrects her that it's a cat. Knock knock. Sir Pietro's arrival is announced, and Errol recognizes him immediately. Dash. Errol rushes over to Pietro and presents him with an invitation. Realizing he's being invited to the Emperor's birthday party, Pietro looks at the card as Errol giggles. Grunt Alexander studies a similar hand-drawn invitation with a puzzled expression, while Errol bluntly states that it's a cat. Ahem. Errol clears her throat, telling Alexander she was touched by his concern for her uncle. Touched, she wishes her uncle knew how he felt, leaving a flustered Alexander at a loss for words. Alexander kneels and smiles warmly at Errol, accepting the invitation as they stand in a shower of roses. Hug! Errol embraces Alexander, thanking him for his protection, which allows her to be herself. Squeeze. As he returns the hug, a thoughtful Alexander gently asks what's wrong. Gasp. Holding an invitation, A horrified Fenrir demands to know where the princess could have possibly heard about His Majesty's birthday. Dash. Errol spots General Raphael reading a book and runs toward him, calling out Grandpa to give him his invitation. Errol cheekily informs the general that he's their special guest, and he smiles, replying that he would be honored. General Raphael begins to tell Errol a story about the emperor meeting a beautiful young lady while traveling in secret. In a flashback, a smiling General Raphael tells a younger Errol that she shouldn't be so nice to him. He asks how she can be so sure of his innocence when even the emperor suspects him, but PFFT? She just giggles at her grandpa. Flash. The memory of her innocent trust makes the general look on in stunned silence. Teesk, teesk. Errol points out that he always makes a sad face when talking about a certain person. Ta-da! Back in the present, Errol brightly announces her plan to bake a giant, multi-tiered cake herself. Eek! Errol informs a horrified Lucinda that she's going to help, leaving her aunt utterly shocked. A gloomy atmosphere surrounds Lucinda as she recalls a bleak childhood of eating only oatmeal. Done! A cheerful, blue-haired woman holding a whisk announces it's time to make a cake and asks for questions. Errol eagerly declares her ambition to make a 10-tier cake, to which the teacher flatly replies, "That's not a question." Boom! In a chaotic memory, a baking lesson goes horribly wrong as Errol's creation turns black, smokes, and explodes, making a young Alexander scream, "Poison!" In another monochrome memory, Errol happily lists the guests for a bloody party, leaving a tense man to decide he'll be sick that day. The teacher offers a strained compliment about Errol's drawing, but Errol knows it's bad and asks her to just admit it. Alexander studies the drawing, noting the figure is smiling but looks sad, while a nervous Errol claims her hand just slipped. Wah! The teacher calls the drawing a cute chubby squirrel, prompting Errol to burst into tears and apologize to her uncle. Clinch! Lucinda earnestly reassures Errol that she's only 6 and will improve with time, giving the little girl a glimmer of hope. When Lucinda says she can't wait to see Errol's art in 10 years, Errol asks if she'll still be there, startling the teacher before deciding to just buy a cake. Alexander gently tells Errol it's the thought that counts, and he'd be moved to tears by her cake, earning a heartfelt hug from the touched princess. Hup! Brandishing a chocolate-covered spatula, Errol declares she'll draw Alexander next, an offer he quickly tries to refuse. Errol insists she'll draw him as a squirrel next to her uncle because he's his favorite person, a claim Alexander denies as Lucinda laughs. Dazzle. The scene shifts to a handsome, purple-haired man posing elegantly amidst a shower of ethereal flowers. A man with dark blue hair recalls the time Errol wanted to pick a queen for him, fondly remembering the gesture as cute. The memory of a younger, smiling Tessa calling out his name flashes through his mind. 2 guards decide to give Tessa some privacy and quietly agree to leave him alone. Done. A blonde guard notes that Errol has been acting strangely, unaware that Tessa is standing right behind him. Eek! The 2 guards frantically insist the princess isn't up to anything, claiming no one has even visited the palace. Punch! Tessa demands to know what the guard said as his partner calls the flustered guard a knucklehead. Tessa holds up a drawing, stating the princess called it a cat, but the guard nervously calls it a pig and then hysterically agrees with himself. Tessa stands silently, holding the drawing as his 2 stoic guards wait behind him. Ta-da! A beautifully decorated cake is revealed, featuring an intricate frosting portrait of a man's face. Stomp! Stomp! A furious-looking Alexander marches toward a startled Errol. The heavy stomping continues as a worried Lucinda and the blue-haired teacher watch the door with apprehension. Stomp. Alexander leads the group forward with grim determination. Burst. The door is thrown open to reveal a line of uniformed palace guards. Errol wonders why her guards are there and how her uncle knew they were making a cake. A guard announces he has a message from His Majesty, prompting Errol to wonder if it's from her uncle. Errol tearfully complains that her uncle won't even let her throw him a birthday party, unlike the parties he throws for her. Tessa's cat-like beast coldly remarks that some people wish they were never born, and when Errol calls it a cat, it angrily denies the label. Errol looks down at the lonely cake, wondering what she should do with it now. The beast tells Errol her uncle doesn't want to see her, but she defiantly declares she wants to see him in person. Whoosh! Langlicia, the nine-tailed fox, appears with a flourish, asking if the incompetent rascals summoned her. As Langlicia offers her help, the other beast chides her for her impolite tone, while Errol taps her foot impatiently. In a dim room, Tessa dismissively tells a blonde guard to go to bed, but the guard refuses. The guard explains that he can't sleep because he is worried about the princess. A brown-haired guard bursts into the room, breathlessly begging His Majesty for help. "Step!" The guards approach Tessa, insisting they are powerless to handle the situation on their own. Flinch. The guard reveals that Langrisa is threatening to set the Pinocchio's palace on fire, causing Tessa to react with shock. Clomp! Tessa grabs the blonde guard by the arm and drags him along as he rushes out of the room. As he runs, Tessa wonders if he's been careless, recalling that Langrisa has always been gentle with Errol. Flash! He races down the hall, questioning why Langrisa would burn the palace, as his guards follow with Errol in tow. Flare! The scene ends on a terrifying vision of a grand castle engulfed in flames. As a blonde guard announces his arrival, a shocked man with dark blue hair looks on with concern. He asks what happened, and a panicked woman informs him that the princess is still inside the burning room. While the anxious woman looks on, the dark-haired man declares with grim determination that he will go in. Flare. He steps forward, walking directly into a raging inferno. Wish. Inside the flames, Errol stands calmly with Alexander, who holds her arm as they are surrounded by fire. Glare. The dark-haired man confronts Alexander, demanding to know why he didn't save Errol, but Alexander explains that she didn't want to be saved. Utterly bewildered by the response, the dark-haired man can only shout in disbelief. Flare. Undeterred, he stands resolute amidst the roaring flames. Whoosh! Langlicia, the nine-tailed fox, leaps through the fire with a tiny Errol safely riding on her back. With a look of strained relief, the dark-haired man calls out for Errol to come to him. Errol angrily calls him a bad uncle, complaining that all she wanted was to celebrate his birthday. He tells her softly that she doesn't have to care for him. Wish. Cradled by Langlicia, Errol tearfully insists that she wants to do something for him too. She declares she doesn't want to be the only one receiving gifts, which seems to move him as he says her name. Errol issues an ultimatum. Agree to a birthday party, or she refuses to leave the flames. As Errol clings to a twitching Langlicia, the man helplessly says her name once more. Glare. He turns his anger on the fox, calling her out as she flinches under his stare. Whir. He yells Langrisa's name in frustration as she seemingly begins to use her power. He claims he's powerless against Errol's whining, but wah! Errol calls Langrisa a traitor for siding with him. Desperate, Errol calls for Lucinda's help as Tessa and Alexander inch away from the confrontation, branding them betrayers. Shout a furious Lucinda appears and demands to know what's going on, while a terrified Errol covers her ears. Shout Lucinda orders Errol to apologize immediately and then demands she say it louder. Hug Lucinda embraces a tearful Errol, admitting with relief that she almost had a heart attack. The tender moment is framed by flowers as the two continue to hug. A small, pink-haired girl tugs on a dark cloak, politely asking a question. A white-haired girl with red eyes looks up adoringly at a man in a red uniform while people chatter in a nearby hall. Back at the palace, a cute but unamused Tessa stands stoically while wearing a pink party hat. Ye Errol proudly presents a birthday cake to her uncle, surrounded by a clapping Lucinda, a festive Poo-Poo, and the majestic Langlicia. Tessa grumpily tells the familiars to leave, but Langlicia teases him about his nice hat. Errol asks Poo-Poo about its birthday, and when it says their birthdays are the same, Tessa reacts with an ew, questioning her response. Squeal! Errol triumphantly exclaims, I made it! And when Tessa assumes she means the cake, she clarifies that's not what she meant. Realizing she meant the drawing on the cake, Tessa inwardly notes that Errol only knows how to draw pigs, despite her insistence that it's a cat. Badum! His heart skips a beat as he looks over at Lucinda, both of them surrounded by a shower of blooming flowers. Tessa seriously questions Errol's belief in birthday wishes, but she impatiently tells him to just cut the cake. Gop! Langlicia licks her sharp teeth, disturbingly remarking that she'd rather eat his flesh. The fox adds, "She'll only do it once," Errol is grown, prompting a giggle from Lucinda and a horrified gasp from the princess. Glare. Tessa sternly declares that will never happen and orders them to drop the subject. In a split image of Tessa and Lucinda, a thought bubble worries their relationship will become too complicated. Lucinda gently pats Errol's head, reassuring her not to worry. Errol makes a wish for her uncle to get married next year, shocking Lucinda while Tessa dismisses it with a whatever. Tessa looks downcast, asking if Errol wants a family, which prompts her to ask if he's lonely. As the room erupts in laughter, Tessa protests that he has both Errol and Lucinda. Dash. The party turns into a game of chase as Errol laughingly runs from Lucinda. Uh-oh. The playful chase comes to a halt as Errol and Lucinda watch in horror as the cake tips over the edge of the table. Slide. With a desperate lunge, Lucinda catches the cake just before it hits the floor. Shimmer. She holds the saved cake and flashes a proud, sparkling smile. Tessa laughs at her expression while Papu tries to claim the chocolate, but Errol forbids it, yelling that it's her uncle's face. Step, step, step. Saying he needs some air, Tessa walks away toward the balcony. Under a full moon, Tessa stands on the balcony, pensively looking at the piece of chocolate cake shaped like his face. Groan. He clutches his face, wondering what's wrong with him for actually agreeing to a birthday party. Clench. With his hands clasped, Tessa tells Errol she shouldn't have prepared all this for him. He looks away with a sad expression, admitting that this kind of celebration just isn't him. Badum. His heart skips a beat as a memory surfaces of a beautiful, smiling blonde woman. In a flashback, the younger blonde woman stands before him on a balcony, offering him a green ribbon as a gift. Holding the ribbon, she sweetly asks if he will accept her small gift. Thump. She beams and wishes him a happy birthday, causing his heart to pound in his chest. Grab. In a swift, romantic gesture, he pulls her close, their faces only inches apart. The memory fades as the two walk away together on the moonlit balcony. Elsewhere, three maids whisper excitedly about His Majesty actually having a birthday party and even wearing a party hat. Sigh. Back in her room, a very bored-looking Errol rests her chin on her hands. Ugh. Errol slumps over her desk, feeling like something important happened without her, as a green-haired man asks if she had a bad day studying. The green-haired tutor pulls up a chair, remarking that he heard the party went well, but Errol grumbles that all they did was eat cake. He laughs, explaining that the party itself was a huge deal, made possible only by the Emperor's great love for her. Errol brightens at the thought of her uncle's love, and the tutor seizes the moment to suggest they learn ancient poetry for him, an idea she loves. As the tutor describes monstrous creatures in the mountains, a shadowy beast growls in an illustration, and Errol declares she never wants to go there. The tutor then describes a prestigious beauty pageant in the north, sparking Errol's excitement to see it. Errol suddenly throws a tantrum, shouting that she wants to travel and have fun, tired of the boring palace, as her tutor calmly agrees she should go. When Errol asks who she should go with, the tutor falls silent as a dark image of Tessa appears in her mind. The tutor says it's a different story if he's with her, because fun things always happen around the princess, though he reminds her she didn't want to go. He suggests that she ask to accompany His Majesty on his annual inspection of the north, and Errol realizes that's where her uncle goes. Full of confidence, Errol does a happy dance, sure her uncle will agree because he loves her, as her tutor claps in encouragement. Boom! The scene cuts to Tessa, who bluntly shuts down her request with, "Not a chance." As Errol asks why not, three older men, including General Raphael, grin in the background, telling her she's too young to go. Chills! Errol retorts that she knows a lot, prompting a smirking Tessa to ask exactly what she knows. Tup! Just as Errol starts to explain how babies are made, a horrified Tessa clamps a hand over her mouth and orders all of her tutors fired immediately. Done. An undeterred Errol stands with her arms crossed, looking thoroughly defiant. Tessa lectures her on the dangers of the outside world, including germs, but Errol groans that he's just being fussy and embarrassing her. An unseen person agrees that the princess has a point, as Tessa and Errol face off. Grin! The white-haired general steps forward with a wide grin, volunteering to look after her himself. The general laughs and vows to protect Errol with his life, much to Tessa's annoyance, as the princess begs her uncle to let her go. Clunk. The heavy doors close, leaving Errol standing beside the victorious general. Errol praises the general, saying he must have known she'd be there, and he confirms it, adding that she likes him best. Snicker. The general smugly recalls disagreeing with His Majesty about the inspection, noting the princess's arrival was perfectly timed. He asks if he can bring his grandson, Rian, and Errol looks up in surprise at the name, Step. Elsewhere, a young woman with short blue hair greets the general as father. The general informs his daughter he'll be escorting the princess on an inspection to the north, and she gasps in shock, saying Errol is just a baby. The blue-haired young woman excitedly thanks her father as someone off-screen questions her change of heart about Rian going to the palace. Wham! An energetic Errol throws open her window to greet the morning birds, startling them. Errol dreamily tells Lucinda she finally understands why princesses sing in movies, but a deadpan Lucinda says she still hasn't figured it out. As two maids bundle her into a thick winter coat, Errol worries she'll be mistaken for a bear and shot on sight. Wish Alexander appears, looking dashing as he notes the princess seems excited for their trip. Errol puffs out her chest and promises to take care of him, causing the blue-haired young man to blush furiously. Boom, their sweet moment is shattered by the sudden stern arrival of Tessa, flanked by two guards. Fwish. Errol performs a perfect, graceful curtsy in her puffy coat, taking her uncle by surprise. Alexander proudly remarks on how grown-up she is, while Tessa remains skeptical and Errol internally insists she's not a baby anymore. Tessa blandly tells them to be careful and come back whenever, but an impatient Errol tells them he can go so they can leave already. Hug. Errol runs forward and gives her uncle a tight hug, telling him she'll miss him. Turning away, Errol asks Lucinda why she isn't saying goodbye to Uncle Tessa, causing both of them to flinch awkwardly. Lucinda quickly announces they'll be on their way, and Tessa quietly agrees, the air thick with tension. In a promotional image, a pitiful-looking girl with white hair and red eyes gazes up at a man in a red military uniform. Grin. The white-haired boy, Rian, flashes a charming smile, surrounded by sparkling flowers. Squeal. Errol clasps her hands in delight, exclaiming that Rian is as cute as ever. As night falls, Alexander worries they'll have to sleep in the open, determined not to let the princess endure that. Errol peeks out of the carriage, excited by the idea of Alexander going hunting, and he playfully offers to catch them a meal. Step. Alexander stands by the carriage at night, noting that the princess is a curious one. Errol asks if his powerful aura scares away the little animal she likes, and Alexander confirms that it does. Errol expresses her disappointment at not seeing Alexander in action, causing him to flinch. Flap. Errol is startled as a white cloak is suddenly whipped through the air, and she wonders what's wrong with his eyes. Alexander elegantly holds the cloak, his expression determined as he prepares to depart. He gently kisses Errol's hand, asking her to wish him luck on his hunt. Jump. Errol blushes furiously, thinking he knows how to make a girl's heart race as she watches him leap into the dark forest. Sigh. General Raphael stands by the carriage, reassuring a worried Errol that Alexander will be back before she knows it. Pouting, Errol nibbles on a snack and complains about wanting to eat meat on a stick like an animal, as Lucinda asks where she gets such ideas. Standing outside in the cold, Errol and Lucinda both express their concern for Alexander's safety. General Raphael advises Errol to sleep in the carriage, but she protests, exclaiming that she wanted to sleep in a tent. Lucinda pulls Errol back toward the carriage, as the princess passionately describes her idea of true camping, leaving the general to wonder what's gotten into her. Glance. Rian looks over at a hooded Errol, who meets his gaze with a curious, huh? Reach. A hand extends toward Rian, calling his name. Dash. In a flash, Errol runs forward and grabs Rian's hand, much to General Raphael's surprise. Lying in bed, Errol offers to let Rian rub Poo-Poo's belly, but Rian politely declines as a grumpy Poo-Poo meows its refusal to be touched. Rian looks on with wide, innocent blue eyes, remaining silent. Chirp, chirp. The royal carriages are parked near a sparkling river in a tranquil mountain valley. Boom. An enormous pile of captured animals appears out of nowhere, prompting someone to ask what it is. Wish. Alexander strikes a proud pose, announcing the triumphant return of her knight. Errol asks if he caught all the animals himself, and he admits with a sparkling gaze that he wasn't sure what she would like. He mentions he first wanted to catch a black-horned lion, causing a gasping Errol to ask if he actually caught it. Slump. Alexander explains that a boy kept following him, pushing forward a cloaked, downcast figure. Sparkle. The cloaked boy looks up, revealing his startling red eyes, and Errol immediately recognizes him. Flash. A memory hits Errol as she realizes the red-eyed boy is Sika. In a flashback, a bearded man with an eye patch corrects a younger Sika's posture, warning him it could affect his growth. The man challenges Sika, asking if he truly thinks hard work alone is enough, as a despairing Sika wonders what he must do. Bam! The bearded man leans in close, telling Sika he needs a good teacher who can pass on his dreams. He suggests a knight with a sterling reputation would be ideal, but Sika quietly doubts such a person would take him as an apprentice. Over a meal, a gray-haired youth panics at the mention of the black-horned lion, calling it the master of the mountains. The gray-haired youth furiously scolds the bearded man for his harsh training methods, but Sika remains silent while the man dismisses the complaints. Whoosh! Alone in the vast, snowy wilderness, Sika wonders how he is supposed to pass his test. Whoosh! He ventures into a dark, foreboding forest under the moonlight. Growl! A massive black panther lunges toward an unsuspecting Sika. Growl. Sika braces himself as the monstrous, three-eyed beast roars, ready to pounce. Done. Sika is stunned as Alexander appears before him with a glowing sword, identifying him only as a young boy. Done. Alexander calmly states he's on his way to catch the black-horned lion and invites Sika to join him. Alexander looks down at Sika, thinking Errol is too young to have come this far, as they approach a glowing cave where a beast growls. As they walk toward the distant carriages, Alexander thinks to himself that she wouldn't recognize him anyway. Badam! Sika's heart pounds as he blushes, admitting to himself that he'd still like to see her. Whoosh! In a swirl of flowers, Sika stands before Errol. Errol looks at a distant, pensive Sika, wondering what he's been up to since they last met. Sika mumbles that he recognized her at once, while a surprised Errol listens. Bam! The green-haired tutor from before appears, offering Errol some clothes and noting they should fit since he's shorter than Alexander. Errol smiles brightly and asks Rian if he slept well, and the young boy gives a cheerful little laugh. Beam! Rian's dazzling smile causes a flustered Errol to stammer that she slept well too. Step. Sika and Errol stand together in the snow, gazing silently at a distant, sparkling mountain peak. Errol brightly calls out Sika's name, and he turns to gaze at her without a word. As sparkling roses drift by, Errol gently invites Sika to come sit by her. Whoosh! A gentle smile appears on Sika's face as rose petals swirl around him in the mountain air. Wish! The green-haired tutor peeks into a tent, asking a cloaked Sika what is going on between him and the princess. The tutor grins, guessing the answer is Lucinda Janin, while Sika looks on in confusion, thinking he wants to know if affection is eternal and that he wants to have her. Rustle. From behind some bushes, Sika watches Errol with Rian and Alexander, thinking to himself that she remembers him. In a completely different scene, a stylish woman in a red dress looks back over her shoulder and declares that she needs her life back. Errol smiles warmly, holding out her hand as she invites someone to come over to her. In a daze of flowers, Sika thinks to himself that she's the only one. Sparkle. Sika beams, making a heartfelt vow to protect her until his dying breath. Poof. Ugh. Poo-Poo suddenly appears on Errol's head, hoping to snag her snack, but she yells at him to get off, calling him a heavy pig. Over a meal, Errol threatens to have Langrisser depose Poo-Poo, prompting Alexander to challenge her and Lucinda to ask where she learns such language. Sika presents Errol with a massive bowl of food, telling her there's plenty more, but she thinks the huge portion is more like torture. Sika holds Errol's hand amid a field of flowers, telling her he wants to get to know her better. Alexander and Rianne watch from a distance as Sika and Errol have their moment. The green-haired tutor's eye is seen observing a smiling Lucinda from afar. A small girl with wavy, peach-colored hair tugs on a dark curtain and asks the reader to continue to the next chapter. Alexander states that having Sika around goes against etiquette since he's a commoner, but Errol grips the boy's cloak and retorts, "Who cares?" Gasp. Feeling bittersweet, Alexander asks if he's nothing more than a chocolate giver to her, prompting Errol to exclaim that he's being unfair. Badum. Errol playfully lifts Alexander's chin, giggling as his heart pounds, and he cries out her name. Step. Pietro approaches, suggesting that since they aren't in the capital, a slight tweak to etiquette could be permitted. Pietro offers to let Lady Jane ride in his carriage to solve the crowding, causing a surprised Lucinda to flinch and question him. With a charming smile, Pietro explains that this ride could be a special chance for them to finally get to know one another. Dudun. Alexander steps between them, firmly stating that it would be unwise for two unmarried people to ride together and invite gossip. Lucinda internally praises how cool and handsome Alexander looks in that moment, wondering if this is the start of a love triangle. Dudun. Pietro cheekily reveals that one of the carriages has already been repurposed to transport hunting spoils, thanks to a brave hunter. The green-haired man dismisses the worry about gossip, leaving Alexander and Lucinda speechless as Errol peeks out from behind them. Rattle. Inside the carriage, Pietro and Lucinda sit across from each other in tense silence. Pietro beams, explaining he wanted to speak with her privately, but Lucinda glares back, stating she has no wish to be alone with him. Pietro probes, asking why Lucinda is so devoted to the princess, and she replies simply that Errol is the only family she has. Grab! Pietro observes that the princess seems lonely, grabs Lucinda's hand, and suggests she'd like a little brother or sister. Sparkle! A radiant Rianne captures the attention of a surprised Sika. In a moment of harmony and peace, Poo-Poo happily declares the food is delicious, while Errol and Rianne enjoy their snacks. Twinkle! Errol offers a wrapped chocolate to a flustered Sika. As an observer notes the sight of one handsome boy next to another, Rianne offers Sika a treat, but Sika politely declines. Errol internally admires both Sika's beautiful eyes and Rianne's undeniable cuteness. Errol clutches her head, wondering what's happening in her mind as she demands a camera, while a different girl with white hair looks at a man. In a flashback, a younger baby Errol happily offers a chocolate to Sika. Sika shyly accepts the treat, thanking her softly as flowers bloom around him. Errol looks at Sika, admiring his pretty eyes and recalling how they shared chocolate when they first met. Bottom. A blushing Sika confesses he's always missed her and is glad they've met again, taking a surprised Errol's breath away. Errol excitedly compliments Rianne for using an aura just like Alexander, and Rianne proudly replies he's trying his best to be like him. Whoosh! The royal convoy arrives before a massive, imposing gate carved from sheer ice. A maid informs another woman that they found Sika in the woods and decided to bring him along on their journey. Alexander advises the princess to maintain her composure as she internally squeals with delight, thinking of Sika as a prospect of the north. The bearded man with the eye patch heartily greets General Raffaello, who laughs warmly and agrees it's been a long time. Rianne gives the bearded man a polite little bow, and the man greets him with a simple, "Hi there, halt." The group stops as Errol asks where Sika is going, and the boy looks back with a worried expression. Sika announces his intention to return home, standing beside maids and guards in the snow. Sparkle! Errol looks up with wide, hopeful eyes. Rush! Sika frantically objects as a stubborn Errol stands her ground with a huff. Pouting, Errol reminds Sika that a knight stays by his charge's side, pleading for him not to go. As young boys vow to become her knights, Sika thinks darkly that Alexander will have to retire soon, much to someone's surprise. Sigh. A pensive Lucinda quietly reflects on the meaning of family. Errol happily reaches for a proud Alexander, with Rianne looking on in admiration. The green-haired man smiles, thinking to himself that someone is surely not as bad as his father. Standing alone in the snowy landscape, Lucinda resolves that she doesn't want to get close to anyone. Errol excitedly announces a castle tour, but Lucinda quietly agrees as they approach the icy structure. Errol cheerfully pulls a blushing Sika along by his cloak as a thoughtful Lucinda watches them. Whoosh! As they approach the castle, Errol decides she'll just have to sneakily ask Lucinda about something. Clap, clap. A giddy Errol seeks confirmation from a weary Lucinda, who can only say her name. A tired Lucinda asks Errol why she is so excited about the situation. Squeal. Errol champions romance, prompting Lucinda to ask how she knew a certain man was going to ask her out. A blushing Lucinda notes that Baron Pietro is her age, and questions if that was Errol's reason for arranging their carriage ride. Flush! A furious Lucinda glares while Errol looks back with innocent curiosity. Errol confronts Lucinda about her actions, causing a distraught Lucinda to turn away in shame. Lucinda postpones the conversation and leaves the room, ignoring Errol's call. Dash! Errol runs frantically down the castle hallway, calling out for Lucinda. Sniffle. Errol cries, worried she's angered Lucinda, while a concerned Sika watches over her. Wah! A crying Errol clings to Sika's leg, leaving him stunned but concerned. Baboom! In a memory, a man with dark blue hair gently touches Lucinda's face, making her heart race. He then looks away, coldly dismissing his own actions as a fleeting impulse, not love. Trickle. A tear streams down her face as she remembers his rejection, believing he would never love anyone. Saka gently holds Errol's hands, sincerely vowing to protect her from everything that brings her tears. In a different story, a little girl with pinkish hair prompts the reader to continue to the next chapter. Wah! A baby's cry echoes from a small, rustic home. Hug! In a flashback, a younger Lucinda embraces a crying baby Errol to comfort her. A radiant Lucinda smiles warmly, surrounded by a swirl of beautiful, sparkling flowers. Wish! Sika comforts Errol, suggesting honesty will earn forgiveness, but she fears Lucinda is too angry this time. Sika kindly offers to accompany a worried Errol to go speak with Lucinda. Alexander suddenly appears, greeting them with a smile and asking if their chat went well. Twinkle. The scene shifts to a vast, starry night sky over the tranquil, snowy mountains. Whoosh! Beneath the stars, a distraught Lucinda calls out her own name in anguish. Alexander expresses concern over Lucinda's vulnerability, and a downcast Errol sadly admits that it's her fault. As Lucinda resolves to apologize, Pietro suddenly appears and asks if her tears are for him. Pietro presses Lucinda about his desire for her affection, but she firmly rejects him, telling him to back off. Reach! Grab! Pietro forcefully grabs Lucinda's wrist as she attempts to walk away. Ugh! Pietro corners her, asking if he's not good enough, but she insists the problem is her inability to love anyone. Wish! Pietro looks down in defeat, leaving both him and a surprised Lucinda momentarily speechless. Amid a shower of blossoms, Lucinda declares internally that she is sick and tired of everything. Wish! Pietro turns to find Alexander standing there, who addresses him by name. Pietro chides Alexander for interfering, but Alexander coolly replies that pressuring a lady is far less polite. Pietro concedes with a bow, admitting he may have gotten carried away. He bows once more, suggesting they can resume their conversation the next day. Trudge. Alexander and Lucinda silently watch Pietro walk back towards the imposing castle. Alexander reassures a confused Lucinda that intervening in such matters doesn't trouble him at all. Pietro's thoughts reveal that Alexander, as the eldest son of the prestigious Raffaello family and an imperial knight, is far above his own station. Sparkle! Pietro reflects that Alexander has protected the princess for years, is always composed, and excels at everything. Amid a field of sparkling flowers, a somber Lucinda admits to herself that there is someone she holds in her heart. Alexander crosses his arms, questioning if she intends to keep her feelings a secret forever. Lucinda realizes she will never know if they are meant to be unless she tells him, as she watches his silhouette walk away. Beam! A newly determined Lucinda smiles brightly, deciding that speaking up is a good idea. Blush! A flustered Alexander covers his mouth, thinking to himself that her sudden change is strange. Inside a grand, sparkling hall being prepared for a banquet, a voice urges for calm, thinking the feeling will pass. Bob-'em! Lucinda's heart pounds as a maid offers her a tray of treats, while Alexander's watchful eye observes from a distance. Tesco General Raffaello reflects that Sika is the princess's weakness, and worries that a distracted Alexander isn't learning to handle things himself, resolving to have a word with him. Laughing, Alexander walks away but spares a final glance for a dejected-looking Lucinda. Smile, Lucinda offers a warm, radiant smile, surrounded by a bloom of pink flowers. Alexander explains to Errol that her aunt might already be interested in someone, causing the little girl to wonder how that could be. Errol glares, asking if Alexander is seriously considering staying with her for life, and he sincerely asks if he shouldn't, as she pinches his cheeks. Squeeze Alexander earnestly declares his wish to stay with her forever, and a blushing Errol agrees he can stay as long as he is able. With a confident smile, Alexander tells Errol that no one in the world could ever replace her in his heart. Bam! Errol passionately declares that the moment someone special comes along, you just know it. Wish. The bearded man with the eye patch announces the beginning of Sika's training to become a true knight as Sika looks on nervously. Squeal. Overjoyed, Errol clasps her hands together and exclaims that Rianne is incredibly cute. Sparkle. A radiant Rianne asks what she means, while Errol internally questions his strange outfit choice. Yell. Errol points and shouts at Rianne, emphatically reminding him that she is the older one. Thump. Alexander gives a serene nod of agreement, prompting a shocked Errol to accuse him of lying. A voice greets Sika, who stands looking formal and elegant in the morning light. Doo-doon. A heavy silence falls between a nervous Errol and a solemn Lucinda. Clench. Lucinda apologizes to Errol for yelling at her, and the little girl softly speaks her name. Hug. With cries of each other's names, Errol and Lucinda share a heartfelt, tearful embrace. Lucinda asks Errol why she was confused about Baron Pietro, explaining that her feelings are more complicated than simple like or dislike. In the carriage, Errol kindly asks Rianne if he is cold or hungry, but he giggles and assures her he's doing great. Errol then glances towards Sika to ask if he's eaten, and he politely confirms that he has. Boom! The massive ornate doors of a grand castle loom before Alexander, Errol, and Lucinda. Reach! Lift! Alexander offers Lucinda his hand and then sweeps her into his arms, much to her surprise. Later, Errol explains to Alexander that Lucinda already has someone she likes. A single tear falls as a heartbroken Lucinda is framed by white lilies. Grrr! With a menacing red aura, Errol mischievously suggests telling Uncle Tessa, predicting he might just blow up the entire country. Alexander recalls how he approached a crying Lucinda with a handkerchief, and how she smiled wistfully while speaking of a heartbreaking crush. Errol suddenly wonders if Alexander was even in the original story, recalling he was only mentioned briefly by General Raffaello. Gasp! In a flash of insight, Errol recalls two shadowy figures, one asking why someone would sympathize with her because of insensitive eyes, the other questioning if she reminds him of his puppet son.